We're going to have 3 awesome speakers who will discuss how California is trying to reach its Renewable Portfolio Standard, target at 50% renewable energy sources by 2030, and to increase energy efficiency measures by 50%. And today we're going to end the year with an energy bang, and I hope this webinar sparks your interest, and maybe you can plug in some of the info you learned from this webinar into your new careers. Today we'll have 3 speakers: Ross Zelen, Jenna Famular, and Benjamin Finkelor. Each speaker will present, and after that there'll be a question and answer portion. So please feel free as they're presenting to enter your questions into the question box. And yeah, I hope you enjoy and learn a lot. So I'm going to hand it over to Katie. Hi everyone, thanks for joining today. Our first presenter is Mr. Ross Zelen, who is the Policy Manager for the Verdexchange Institute and editor for the Los Angeles-based The Planning Report. Verdexchange is an LA-based nonprofit policy and technology think tank that seeks to advance solutions in collaboration in the clean energy, water, transportation, and sustainability sectors. Previously, Zelen worked for the California Energy Commission within the Research Division and served as an executive fellow to Chair Mary Nichols at the California Air Resources Board in 2014. Getting his start while an undergraduate at UC Santa Barbara, Zelen helped to establish the UC for Clean Energy campaign in 2012. That campaign worked with the UC leadership as they established the Carbon Neutrality Initiative. Today, Ross will be talking about the state efforts to reach the clean energy goal. I'm really excited to have him today. So Ross, if you're ready, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Katie. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Wonderful. Well, good morning. It's really a pleasure to be with all of you, especially for your last seminar of the program. I think this is just a phenomenal program. I'm really excited to be a part of it in a little small way. So today I'm going to talk to you about California's renewable energy policies and programs, kind of at a macro level. I'll kind of give the 30,000-foot level, and then I know my 2 other speakers are going to they're going to dive into the weeds a little bit more about how we're actually going to achieve these goals. So I'm gonna go full screen. Hopefully you guys can all see that. And we're gonna kick it off by just kind of giving a framework for how we're going to get to 50% and where we've been. So where we've been. So in 1998, the California legislature that was championing the history of Jerry Brown's first term and focus on solar energy and our history of innovation, basically told the California Energy Commission, here's a renewable energy program. We don't really know exactly what it's going to look like, but here it is. And so we started...
Ross, sorry to interrupt you for 1 second. I'm getting some questions through saying that fellow can't see the screen. So can anyone else chat into the question bar to let me know if you can actually see the presentation? All right, it looks like most folks can see it. So if you can't see it, oh, okay, thank you everyone. Great. If you can't see it, I would try logging back out and logging back in. It looks like most folks can actually see the screen sharing. But sorry to interrupt, Ross.
Oh.
I'll turn it back over to you.
We want to make sure everyone can see it because there's no way I'll be able to explain it all. Great. So I'm going to go back into full screen mode, and so I'm going to go back to where I was, and let me know. Feel free to chime in if anyone can't see it and we're having any issues. So essentially, the legacy of how we got to a renewable portfolio standard and where we are today is within the leadership of the leadership of the state legislature, and folks like Byron Scher. If you've been to the California EPA building in Sacramento, the auditorium is named after him. He was the senator who passed Senate Bill 1078, which established the Renewable Portfolio Standard and established a lot of the clean energy policies that kind of gave way to the Fran Pavlis and the Fabian Nunez's of the AB 32 world. And so in 2004, when the Energy Commission recommended that we had an RPS, a Renewable Portfolio Standard, of 33% by 2020, it was looked at as kind of this way off in the distance target goal. It was like, okay, maybe we'll get there. I don't really see a pathway right now. But if you look at that, how far we've come today, it's a really amazing progress, because now we're up to 26%. We're looking at hitting our 33% goal by 2020, no problem. And we're looking forward to 2030 and hitting a 50% goal. So really, I'm going to try to give a brief overview of how all the state agencies play into kind of the two overarching questions. One, what is the role of distributed energy resources in cutting greenhouse gas emissions and improving our amount of clean energy that will be put into the Renewable Portfolio Standard? And two, how are these agencies going to work together? How are these agencies going to collaborate and pass these transformative policies? And how is that going to affect us on the ground, you guys working in local government agencies, for the local boots on the ground? And so looking at how all of these different four entities in Sacramento really have an impact on what we're doing on the ground, whether it be in Southern California, Central Coast, or in the North State, it really doesn't take much to understand that the state level is just the first step. It's just setting the policies and establishing these policy drivers that can drive the marketplace and drive the individual actions that will actually get us to that 50% goal. And so, and feel free, if anyone has any questions about specific terms, feel free to type them in the chat bar. I'm happy to explain them. But really, if you look at this, the Energy Commission, the state's energy think tank, essentially, they're kind of the ones they're kind of writing the energy playbook. You know, they're going to write the plays that can help move the team down the field in the broad sense. But the Air Resources Board, and being the lead agency in charge of AB 32, is really the team's secret weapon. And the Public Utilities Commission, I always refer to, is kind of like the officials on the field. They're kind of the folks who are making sure that there's still some structure. They are overseeing the investor-owned utilities, and they're kind of making sure that the marketplace is responding okay. They're kind of tempering the speed of the game. So let's taking a look at where we are now. Now, in just in the time that it's taken me to make this PowerPoint, we've seen major changes. We saw the passage of SB 32 and AB 197. These are really amazing bills that are going to have a lasting impact, just like AB 32 had, and they're really going to provide certainty to the renewable energy market, which is really what Senator Pavley was really hoping to do, is provide certainty to these renewable energy businesses and enterprises in California, knowing that there's going to be support for them in the long term. So obviously the 50% renewable energy target is encapsulated in Senate Bill 350. And so how it's being implemented right now is the Energy Commission is studying all of the barriers that's going to take us to get there. So one, driving down energy demand through energy efficiency, demand response, and other kind of smart grid technologies is going to help us achieve our 50% goal, because we're just going to need less energy. Now we're going to need to balance that with the fact that as more of us have more cell phones, tablets, laptops. We're going to need to change how we think about energy, because now we're plugging in more devices, but we're kind of welcoming that Internet of Things world. We're entering the world where hopefully we're going to be able to use smart grid technologies to use our resources wisely. And then we have the large-scale utilities, the Pacific Gas and Electrics, the Southern California Edison, the San Diego Gas and Electrics. They're the big players in the room. They're the ones who are implementing the Renewable Portfolio Standard, and they're figuring out how to integrate distributed energy resources or distributed generation into their business model, into their 100-year-old infrastructure. And that's really where we're going to see the big bump in renewable energy over the next 10 years. That's really what's going to get us there. Both the large-scale solar, wind, and other renewable energy projects, match that with the smaller projects of the solar cities working with the larger infrastructure owners to get us there. So the importance of how we got to where we are really lies in the research division. And I know many of you guys have worked in projects that have to do with implementing research dollars. I know the city of Fresno, the local government commission, just won a grant to implement kind of a microgrid strategy and an energy efficiency strategy in the city of Fresno, which is a pretty amazing accomplishment. And so that shows you kind of where we're at. How we're actually going to get there is we're going to get there through pilot projects and proving time and time again that it can work in all different geographies. And then, therefore, it's really going to look like it's going to be up to us. It's going to be up to the local governments to really make sure that we're going to get there, and we're going to have to prove these technologies time and time again. So one of the big things that I wanted to set straight, because it's a very complicated process and it's not necessarily the easiest program to understand, is the energy imbalance market from the CalISO. The independent service operator is slowly integrating a energy imbalance market that is essentially going to make everything in our energy world kind of like it is in our real world. Everything is getting faster. We're kind of expecting our news faster, our coffee faster. We're kind of expecting everything quicker. Same thing is happening in our energy world, and we're using technology to find the lowest cost, cleanest, greenest energy available at the moment. And it's the idea of, on a hot day right now, California, which has a tremendous amount of solar, has to figure out a way to get rid of some of its solar energy during the middle part of the afternoon, and then at 5 o'clock, since we don't have enough energy storage in our system, then we're having to then ramp up natural gas peaker plants to provide for energy when all of us go home and we turn on our televisions and we turn on and we plug in all our devices. And so we need to find a way to both increase storage, and there's been numerous bills in this year's legislature. Senator Mike Gatto just passed a bill for behind-the-meter energy storage. There was a handful of bills that really focused on increasing storage, but the energy imbalance market, which the ISO and this Energy Commission and the CPUC are all kind of working together to figure out, is how are we going to align ourselves in the entire region that is the West to ensure that we can find the cheapest, greenest energy, whether it be wind from Wyoming, hydropower from Oregon or Washington, and use it in California, and then we'll send them our solar in the afternoon. And that will help us protect grid reliability, which is really the focus of all of the state agencies, is to really make sure the lights are staying on and they're protecting ratepayers' pocketbooks. So just to kind of frame it as we move into our other two speakers, the role of local governments are key. They are the drivers, and they're the only ones who are going to make us get there. And I know our friends at Marin Clean Energy are going to talk more about community choice aggregation, but it's interesting that as we do this, there's folks who are in the Los Angeles City Council chambers who are working on both a renewable energy portfolio and a renewable energy focused clean community choice aggregation model. So if you can see that, you can really see that local governments are going to be the drivers here. They're going to be the ones who increase it from 26% to 27% and 27% to 28%. They're going to help us get there 1% at a time, and they're going to continue to put the pressure on the utilities to innovate and to adapt and to integrate more distributed energy resources. So what happens next, and where do we fit in? We have to have major increases in energy storage. We're going to see major increases in distributed energy resources over the next 10 years. And that's everything from as big as the big solar projects that we see in Palm Springs and the desert, and figuring out how we're going to protect biodiversity and yet throw up a bunch of solar panels and have some energy storage related. We're going to have to figure out that. We're going to have to figure out how time of use pricing and demand response play into how we think about energy, and we're going to continue to see that paradigm switch. And the other thing is really just having a younger generation of people continue to put pressure on the decision makers from where you get your energy from. And one of the big things I always talk about is that I knew nothing about energy not very long ago. But I started seeing that if I wanted to do something about climate change, it was really about putting pressure on the folks who made the decisions on where I was getting my energy from. So if at UC Santa Barbara, when I was a student there, I realized that I could fight for climate change in a lot of different ways, but really working with the campus engineers and the campus leadership who were signing the check and writing the contracts for how we were going to get our energy and how much clean energy we were being promised and what we were being given, is really the one way how we get there. So it's really about that. It's that broader holistic vision, but these incremental steps. And I know sometimes it can get a little frustrating to look at the incrementalism, but it's really, when you really think about the holistic view of what the future of the energy grid is, it's going to be one decision at a time. So with that, I think I'll pass it on to our other two speakers, and I'll be available for questions afterwards.
Thank you, Ross. We're actually going to move into, we have some questions coming in, so we're going to do a little question and answer right now before we go on to the next speaker. A lot of questions coming in about the energy imbalance market that seems to have intrigued a lot of our cohort. One of the questions is, since there's been mention of California exchanging its solar energy with other states, do you think the EIM will expand nationwide, or are there already EIMs in other states? And sort of what does the governance of an EIM sort of sharing market look like?
Sure. So so it's interesting. So the Western, it's an amazing thing how you think about energy, because so much of our infrastructure was built 120 or 130 years ago. So our grid is a Western grid, and our Western grid is Washington, Wyoming, Montana, all up until the Rocky Mountains, because when you think about it, it just took so much energy and time, and it was very dangerous to go over the Rockies. And so we have this Western grid that is called the West. It's called the WEC states. It's the Western states grid, the WEC states. And then you have the Midwest, which is everything from like the Mississippi to the Rocky Mountains. And so that's called MISO, the middle independent service operators. And then we have East Coast. Then we have East Coast grids, and I think they're a little bit smaller, just because obviously they're 200-year-old infrastructure and 200-year-old kind of systems, because they were the first 13 colonies. And so I don't really see us. I don't really see anyone, either nationally or state level, really pushing for the tremendous amount of infrastructure investment it would take to align nationally. But I think you'll see significant amount of money and significant amount of time being put into reinforcing our existing infrastructure that is between our neighboring borders. So Nevada, who's are going to have a ton of solar as well, and when you talk about partnerships, I mean they're going to be building the Teslas that will then be getting the zero-emission vehicle credits in California, and Oregon, who shares a tremendous amount of water resources with California. So there's a lot in play. I don't really see us going to a more national grid, but I really see what California is doing as the model for other states to integrate renewable energy technologies into their portfolio or into their planning that they might not, in the ways that they might not be doing now. You might not be having states in the Northeast thinking about how they can align with warmer states, maybe North Carolina or Kentucky, as those states start to transition off of coal and maybe into more renewables that are operable in the wintertime, even though it is cold and it does snow in states like the Carolinas and Kentucky. It's not as frequent as it is in Maine or Massachusetts, and so you might be able to see some regional partnerships form in using the California and the Western states model.
Great, thank you, Ross. That's very interesting. So do you think this would sort of need to be a federal level sort of governance to sort of get everybody to cooperate, or do you think the regional powers will be able to drive this transition?
So there's the federal level. There's a handful of agencies just like we are in California. So the federal level energy transmission is run by FERC, which is the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, and not the Department of Energy. So FERC oversees any decision that's made by a group like CalISO, an independent service operator. So the Midwest, the East, all of their versions of the ISO are overseen by FERC, and FERC has a decision that is really, really important for all of you folks who are hoping to get into the energy world. It's called Order 1000. And Order 1000 is really about what happens when you start integrating these really large solar players like Solar City, who's now partnering up with Tesla. And how is a group like that going to change the game? And so FERC established Order 1000, basically saying we have whatever you're going to think about for your grid, you have to think about non-transmission up investments first, which means that you would have to think about energy efficiency first. You'd have to think about local renewable resources, so local solar, which is the California Solar Initiative or the New Solar Homes Partnership, or biomass facilities in the state of California. You'd have to think of those first before you said, wait, let's build more transmission to states like Wyoming or Montana with huge amounts of wind resources, or huge amounts of hydro in the states. If you're talking about Washington or Oregon, they have huge amounts of hydroelectric resources. And so no matter what, we're going to have to throw all the states together are going to have to throw trillions of dollars to get themselves off of fossil fuels and into renewable resources. Now the big debate is, do you spend those large sums of money, whether it be billions or trillions, do you spend those large pots of money on doing kind of that grid scale statewide or even multi-state projects, or do you go more local and say, well, we're going to 3,000 local solar panels, and then we're going to do a storage project, and we're going to do electric vehicle charging. And really, if we're going to get to our 2050 goals, which is completely decarbonizing our electricity system, we're going to need all of the above. We're not going to be able to choose. So it's really going to be an and situation. We're going to have to invest money in bringing that wind energy from Wyoming to California and then sending our solar back to Washington in the winter, or sending our solar back to another state that might need it at the time. So I would say it's going to be an and situation, but it'd be really interesting to watch what the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, what FERC does in the next year or two as they try to walk the middle path with appreciating and engaging large companies like SolarCity, but also making sure that they're not becoming just another monopoly.
Excellent, thank you. That was a really good answer. So we have a more technical question next, still around the topic of EIM. What do you know about the effects of transmission and distribution losses that have, what are their effects on the EIM mechanism?
So I will not lie to you. I'm not the engineer. I am not the expert on transmission losses, but it is definitely a concern, because that was always the concern about, well, we'll just send our energy, our solar energy, to another state. Well, you lose 10%, you lose 15%. If you didn't lose anything, we would just cover the desert or the Central Valley, our non-farmland in the Central Valley, with solar panels, and we'd call it a day, and we'd say, yeah, we hit our clean energy targets. But with those transmission losses, it becomes a lot less efficient. And so one of the things that the energy imbalance market uses, it uses a 5-minute or up to the minute kind of understanding of what the grid looks like, and so they can kind of start understanding from just basic math point of view, if we're going to lose 5% of our solar, well, we need to up 5%, and then we need to make sure that we have some base load, which is kind of the big issue, is that with solar and wind being a little bit more variable, with when you have variable renewable energy resources, states and cities will make sure that they're running natural gas power plants, which used to be the nuclear power plants along the coast, to make sure that we had that steady base load, to make sure that we had reliable energy at all times. And so as more and more technologies are invested in through either state-level energy research or private sector or university research to reduce the level of transmission loss, then we'll see more state-level regulators, more of the big decision makers having the confidence to say, well, we'll rely on the solar, we'll rely on the storage, and we can turn off some of those natural gas peaker plants, or we'll turn off some of those older generators and integrate more of the renewable energy resources as our base load, because we have the energy imbalance market, so we can see it real time, and we have these new and improved resources that are much more reliable.
Great, thank you. So it sounds like storage is definitely something that will be big down the road. So maybe go back to school, be an electrical engineer, and do that instead. No. We have time for a couple more questions. A couple of fellows were curious if there's a map of the western states grid that we could check out and sort of explore where the energy is coming from. Do you know if there's a map like that available online somewhere?
Absolutely. I will make sure that you have that map. I will find it and send it to you. But if you go to CalISO's website, I bet you can find a map of all the states that they're working with. It's a very interesting thing. So this is just a kind of a fun fact, but it kind of understands how hot the market, the business case is for this world. So Warren Buffett, billionaire Warren Buffett, very smart decision maker Warren Buffett, has bought large shares of many of the electricity producing companies, not in California, but surrounding California. So Oregon and Pacific Corp, Wyoming with the Wyoming Wind Energy, Nevada. I believe he even has a stake in some of the Idaho and in Montana, in smaller, even very small energy generation. And I think it's because he sees the potential. And so, normally if someone who's made billions and billions of dollars off of smart decisions is investing in this kind of idea, you normally get a little bit of that sign that, oh, this is a good idea. This is a good thing, and there's a huge potential in this. So it would be interesting. It's an interesting read. I'll try to send the article that I found about Warren Buffett kind of throwing significant amounts of investments into this kind of Western states model, knowing that it's only going to get more important, and he's, you know, it's only a better and better investment as more policy drivers and more regulators are pushing for integrating our states. That being said, and that being said, there is a huge contingency in California of environmentalists and activists and policy experts that are hesitant to push forward on the energy imbalance market faster. There, and I know you can see it at the bottom of your screen, but there really is some major pushback to make sure that we're not reducing all the progress we've made since the energy crisis about a decade ago, a little over a decade ago, in making sure that we are we have a very reliable amount of energy. And so some folks believe that this going towards a more regional model will actually leave us more vulnerable in case something happens. Maybe a large forest fire happens between Wyoming and here, and we knock down the transmission lines, and we were relying on that, or between Oregon and Washington, or something like that. So there is some hesitancy, and it is, you know, definitely a work in progress. So I would just throw that out there. This presentation should not sell you on the energy imbalance market as the be-all end-all solution.
That's great. Yeah, one of our last questions was, you know, if you want to keep that reliability, does that mean going backwards and taking, you know, carbon-based energy from another state and sort of, you know, taking a step back from our renewable goal? But so with your last point, you kind of answered that question by saying EIM is not the end-all be-all, so it's sort of a collaborative effort to move forward.
Yeah, and I think the biggest message I can leave you with, which is kind of, it's not a spiritual insight. It's not gonna be anything new, but it's the idea that it's going to take actions like the energy imbalance market and the actions like at the Los Angeles level of saying, okay, well, we made an announcement a couple of years ago that we're going to get off coal by 2025. And Los Angeles was importing coal energy from Arizona, where it's still pretty prevalent. Not coal energy is pretty much done in the state of California. But now we've said that, we have a little bit of a plan, but how are we actually going to make sure that we have completely reliable energy, maybe even lessening our reliance on natural gas after the Aliso Canyon disaster? And so how are all of those policy drivers going to intersect with that need for reliability, that need for cheap, efficient, and reliable energy, which is always what both the state level is promoting and your local government, because without the lowest cost and the most reliable electricity, businesses they go back to what we just were dealing with SB 32, is they need that certainty. They need that that feeling of no matter what, the government's got my back. I'm here, you know, I'm gonna have reliable electricity, I'm gonna have reliable energy to make my product, to then sell it in the market.
Thank you so much, Ross. So we're short on time, so we're going to hand it over to the next speaker, but thank you for all your insights, and thank you for joining us today.
Great, thank you guys.
All right, yeah, thank you, Ross. That was incredibly insightful, and for the cohort, if y'all still have questions, keep sending them in, and if we have time at the end, we can try to answer some of them still. But I would like to introduce our next speaker. So next we have Jenna Famular, who is the Community Affairs Coordinator for Marin Clean Energy. And she is going to be talking about the role of community choice aggregation and its role in the future of California energy. Jenna has an undergraduate degree from UC Santa Cruz in marine biology and a master's in climate and society from Columbia University. Most of her experience is in informal science education at the Seymour Marin Discovery Center, the San Francisco Zoo, the Bronx Zoo, and the California Academy of Sciences. Actually, initially, she began at Marin Clean Energy as a Climate Corps Bay Area Fellow before being offered a full-time position on the Public Affairs team. So with that, I'm very excited to introduce Jenna Famular to talk about Marin Clean Energy. Thank you, Jenna.
Hi, thank you. Can everybody hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you loud and clear.
Okay, great. So thank you to Ross for speaking. A lot of what he talked about is sort of what we feel about community choice aggregation, that it's really a local level effort to make a lot of these long-term changes that need to be made to make renewable energy more sustainable and more available in California, and to get away from fossil fuels and the climate change situation. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what community choice aggregation is, the kind of projects that we're involved in with energy efficiency and storage and all that kind of stuff. So community choice aggregation is actually this concept that you can take a community of whatever size and harness that purchasing power to secure energy. So in 1997 in Massachusetts, Cape Light Compact came online. They were the first community choice aggregation agency in the country, and today their focus is really on energy efficiency. So energy efficiency can do a lot to reduce the amount of energy we actually need to be producing. And then in Ohio, in 1999, the Northeast Ohio Public Energy Council came online, and their focus was actually on lower rates. So community choice aggregation can come from a couple different perspectives. In Massachusetts, it's really energy efficiency and conservation. In Ohio, it was really like, we want to find a way to have our rates be lower for our consumers. And then in California, when MCE got started, we started in 2010, but the laws were put on the books for community choice agency in 2002, and our focus is really on renewable energy, as well as energy efficiency and local reinvestment. So community choice aggregation doesn't have to be renewable energy, but especially in California, that tends to be the case. So there are 7 states that currently have community choice aggregation programs or have laws on the books that make those programs legal. And there are 3 states considering: Delaware, Montana, and Utah. So the community choice movement is really big. It's, when it rains, it pours. So it's growing. And the good news is that there's a lot of opportunity in California for this to come online. But the bad news is that we're, sort of fighting tooth and nail to get these programs implemented. So when MCE started in 2010, there had been a lot of discussion about it beforehand, since 2002 when the laws were put on the books, and PG&E had really marketed against us to say this biggest thing was, their government bureaucracy and we can't trust them. And for a lot of people, that's still a concern today, is we're government, are we secure? Is the energy that we're providing secure? It's a concern, and it's an understandable concern for customers that, the government tends to be slow moving. Are they really going to be effective at purchasing energy? The government's in the energy business, but it's something that is becoming more and more common. And I like to say, thanks to MCE, we really started this movement. And we formed in 2008, started serving customers in 2010, and now as of 2016, we serve approximately 250,000 customers. So a customer in the energy business is a meter. And so if you live in a home that has a single meter, but you live there with your spouse and your 3 children, that's 5 people. Or if you live in an apartment complex where it's master metered, that could be, somewhere around 100 people or more. So the population of people that we serve is a lot higher, but we've got 250,000 meters. So it's pretty exciting. So in California, as I mentioned, the CCA movement is really growing. MCE was the first CCA in California, and then followed quickly by Sonoma Clean Power, as well as Lancaster Choice Energy down south. And Clean Power SF just launched last month. I think now they're serving just about 28,000 customers. So next coming online, we're probably looking at San Mateo, then Peninsula Clean Energy, Silicon Valley Clean Energy, Monterey Bay, Alameda County, Contra Costa County. The list just goes on. And as Ross mentioned, LA is looking into it, San Diego's looking into it. So there's so many opportunities for communities to come together and make this an option. And everybody's exploring it now, which is really exciting because we're expecting in the next 10 to 15 years that 60% of California's energy can be served by CCAs, which is important because it represents a local opportunity for agencies to make decisions that are best for them. So if you're looking at it statewide or countrywide, you have problems of, okay, well, this is best for one group but not best for another, and how do we manage all of those interests, and how do we make sure that there's funding that's equal for each of these communities? And there's just so many components that go into it. But when you get communities involved, these communities decide if they want to join. They have to vote to join, and community can be a city, a town, or a county, and each of those sections has to vote to join. So for example, we are enrolling 5 communities in Napa right now. Napa County enrolled last year, and then the cities and the one town in Napa had to vote independently to join. So every time someone votes to join, they're saying, I support your mission. I want, my resources, my power to go behind this mission, whatever that may be. So for MCE, it's renewable energy and local reinvestment. But for example, in San Diego, they're looking at starting their program where they would match the renewable energy content of San Diego Gas and Electric, but have lower rates, and then also offer a 100% renewable option. So in that way, customers are saying, I want less expensive electricity, but I also want this choice of more renewable energy. So that way you kind of get all of the components involved. So what is MCE? I'm just going to talk about us a little bit more just as an example. Again, community choice agencies vary in their mission and their structure, but in California, a lot of the agencies are based off of MCE as a role model just because we were the first. So that's sort of why I'm looking at it this way. So as I mentioned, our mission is to address climate change by reducing greenhouse gas emissions. So we focus on building renewable energy capacity, providing stable and competitive rates in competition with PG&E, providing local economic and workforce benefits. Again, this is centered around building renewable energy resources as well as energy efficiency. CCAs are local agencies. MCE is a not-for-profit public agency, so we're a government agency, so we're run by a board of elected officials, and the elected officials come from our member communities, and they're not compensated to be on our board at all. The benefit of this type of structure is that when you're a not-for-profit agency, you don't have any shareholders. If you don't have any shareholders, that means you don't have to pay out dividends, and you can reinvest any excess profit to local reinvestment. So for MCE, we have about 90% of the revenue that we make goes directly back towards purchasing energy for our consumers. We have a 4% overhead, which is for staffing costs and things like that, and that's pretty standard with this type of agency across the board. And then that 6% is left over, and that really goes towards local reinvestment, building capacity for renewable energy, and looking into pilot programs for increasing that storage availability and things like that. So right now we have 24 member communities, all of Marin County, all of Napa County, Benicia, El Cerrito, San Pablo, Richmond, Lafayette, and Walnut Creek. So this is sort of the question of like, what do we consider local? So just to provide an example, San Francisco Clean Power SF launched, and San Francisco originally approached MCE and said, we're really interested in doing this. Can we join you? What are our options? And San Francisco is a really big community. There's a lot of people that live there, and it makes more sense for them to start their own program because they're their own independent area. They, you know, they have different needs that their consumers have. They have a much wider population range. And so these are all things that need to be considered when you're considering who is included in your agency, how big you actually want to be. So people asking us, well, how big do you want to get? And we don't actively recruit. So again, this is sort of communities who want to join, who want to be a part of this mission can make that choice. And it's important to note that if your community does join MCE, you're not required to receive electricity from MCE. And I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. So community choice aggregation, the way that these systems work is that the generation portion where your electricity is actually generated is taken over by the agency. So for MCE, we take over the generation from PG&E, and then that generation still is transmitted and distributed through PG&E's lines. So PG&E continues to do the maintenance. So all of the customers that we serve with generation continue to be PG&E customers. So this is sort of the question of like that local, getting that local energy into the grid or getting that renewable energy into the grid is really important, but we have to figure out ways to work together to help relieve grid congestion, build that capacity, manage storage, and that back and forth of energy that is a problem in California because the grid was really designed to be one way. So now we've got all this solar coming from homes and things like that, or like a biogas plant. So if it's like a Marin Sanitary District, for example, they have a digester program, so they produce biogas, which is really cool, but it's coming, you know, it's producing this exchange of energy in a way that wasn't expected. So we take over the generation, PG&E continues to do the distribution while we're all sort of working together to manage the energy market. And then the customers don't really see any difference. They can choose where their energy is coming from now. They have more renewable options. So before MCE, customers didn't have a choice of where their energy was coming from. Default service was 30% renewable energy, and actually when we started, it was much lower than that. And PG&E is an investor-owned utility, which means that, you know, shareholders are making some of these big decisions, and it's not really a focus on what's best for the community, although PG&E does make a really concerted effort to try to be a big part of their communities, but it's hard when you're so large and your communities need different things. With Community Choice Agency, with MCE, you get a choice of where your electricity is coming from. We want to provide that market competition to customers. We want to offer them a larger portion of renewable energy. In our case, it's a 50% renewable energy base rate for just about the same cost. And it's really community focused. It's community decisions, community decision makers, deciding what's best for their constituents. So we focus on renewable energy. That's one of the biggest things in California to get away from, you know, this air pollution, fossil fuels, all this kind of thing. You know, the air quality in California, there's concerns about it just because of all of the cars on the road. And if we can make a dent in that by taking a lot of these emissions off from homes and businesses, that can make a really big difference. So these are the choices that you get if you're an MCE customer. PG&E service is 30% renewable, and you can opt out and go back to this service. So Community Choice Agency in California is an opt-out program, which means that anytime a community choice aggregation program is started, all the customers in that service area are automatically enrolled in that program. Customers still have the choice to go back, and if they do that before service starts, there's no charge, there's no repercussions for that at all. But they also have other options, which for MCE is a 50% renewable option. That's our default service option. So customers are automatically enrolled in this. And when CCA laws were put on the books, the state decided that this is how it would be because they wanted to give these agencies a fighting chance. There's no point in putting all of this energy and investment into an organization that really doesn't have the ability to get started. And having a community choice agency provide an option of a 100% renewable service, which we provide too, is one of the biggest ways that you can make a dent in your energy usage and in your greenhouse gas emissions. So we offer a 100% renewable option. which last year was 75% wind and 25% solar. And we also offer a 100% local solar option. So I'm going to show you where that energy is coming from later. But it's basically for customers, you know, solar is expensive for customers who don't want to pay for it, who can't pay for it, who their home is facing the wrong direction or they don't want to cut down trees. This is an option for them where they can say, you know, they can drive out to the solar farm and say, that's where all my energy is being produced. So it's really focused on this local concept of local renewables. We also offer energy savings programs. We've paid out since 2013 $866,000 in rebates, and we saved almost 8 million gallons of water. So energy efficiency is this really big component of the energy market where you're trying to reduce the amount of consumption, and then it also brings into, you know, we have pilot programs that brings into that concept of storage and managing the grid. So Ross sort of talked about electric vehicle storage, battery storage, all that type of stuff. So we have worked with Tesla to create battery storage projects. We're still working with them on trying to create some battery storage capacity in homes, as well as looking at an electric vehicle pilot, which we'll be launching in January with eMotorWorks, where customers are participating in the DRAM and the real-time market, which basically those two programs, that they're monitored by the CAISO, and when customers are charging their cars, they monitor it so that they can charge their cars when the lowest cost, most renewable energy is on the grid, and that helps relieve grid congestion. And then when if the car is plugged in and energy is needed, drawing off those batteries. So using electric vehicles as battery storage as well, how can that be done effectively? And that's something that we're looking into. So the big question, where does the power come from? This is our most popular question. This is sort of just a map of our service area where we try to stimulate, we do stimulate local projects all the way around in California, as well as union jobs. So all the little hard hats are union jobs. We have biogas, biomass, geothermal, hydro, solar, and wind. So a lot of different components, and the more types of renewable energy you can get on the grid, the more reliability you're going to have. That's that question of base load. Is we want to get away from the natural gas base load, but what other base load options do we have? It's pretty much geothermal, biomass, and biogas are the best options. And partially that's because large hydro in California is not considered renewable. It's carbon-free, but it's not renewable just because of the way that the watershed works in California. We have long periods of drought. We don't have the capacity to build a lot of more renewable, a lot more large hydro. So that's why that is operating that way. So we simulate local projects. We have 9 local projects, about 20 megawatts just in the local area, and then 10 projects in California, about 200 megawatts, which is a $516 million commitment, powering about half the homes we serve each year. So it's this really big focus on renewable projects, including workforce development, supporting jobs and union work hours to have these people come and build these facilities, and then they can say, well, I've built solar before, and then they have those job skills. The main goal here is to be 80% renewable and 95% carbon-free by 2025. This is a really big push to get all the way above that. We know we've already met the Renewable Portfolio Standard, so let's keep going. Let's make it even better. And we also have provided cost savings. So between 2014 and 2015, we saved our customers $16 million, which is a really big deal. But CCAs affect the renewable energy market because they take load away from, for example, in our area's PG&E, we take that generation capacity and we put more renewables onto the grid. So that means that PG&E is able to reduce the amount of contracts that they have for natural gas or other non-renewable sources, and then that increases the overall renewable content of the entire electricity grid. So it's a really interesting way to do this and to increase renewable content just a little bit at a time. So this is a Solar One project. It's a 10.5 megawatt facility in Richmond. So it's a local project. It's on a brownfield site, and it is one of the ways that we reinvest in the community. There's also this project, 1 megawatt project this is the project that local Seoul goes through, Cooley Quarry. So that's expected to be online in January, and we'll be serving approximately 600 customers with that. And San Rafael Airport. So San Rafael Airport and the Buck Institute are both feed-in tariff projects. So these organizations, San Rafael Airport decides they want to build a solar array, will MCE buy the energy. So we do buy that energy, we purchase it from our customers, and that increases renewable capacity without having, creating this economy of scale and not taking up local land because it's on something that's already built up. Lastly, over our period since inception, 2010 to 2014, we've saved 122,000 metric tons of greenhouse gas emissions from being emitted, which is approximately 26,000 cars. So it's pretty exciting, the impact that just a small local agency can really have. So with that, I'm ready for questions.
All right, thank you, Jenna. That was incredibly informative, and I think it's very apparent that CCAs have quite the role to play in the future of California energy, and are very closely integrated with a lot of the policies, regulations, and things that Ross was talking about earlier. Mm-hmm. We do have time for just a couple of questions, but first off, and correct me if I'm wrong, but from what I heard in the beginning, for MCE at least, that the rates were actually more expensive than PG&E, and I was just wondering if maybe you could touch on that a little bit, and if that made it more difficult to retain customers at all, and if
sure.
Managing expectations was ever a problem, and I don't know if maybe you could elaborate on that a little bit.
Sure. So we have been cheaper than PG&E some of the time, and we've been more expensive than PG&E some of the time. It's been about half and half. The biggest concern, I would say, for customer retention is actually not the price. We haven't been significantly off from PG&E ever. We've mostly, been within a couple percentage points. So for some people, that makes a big difference. I've been talking to customers with this enrollment, and we're going to be 50 cents cheaper when they enroll in September, and some customers are like, great, 50 cents a month. But for most customers, the biggest things are they're concerned about us being a government agency. They don't like the fact that we are an opt-out program. They feel that's heavy-handed. And there's concern about the reliability of energy from us. And for some people, it's just, I don't know what the heck this is. I just want to stay with PG&E. I've had them forever. So I would say that cost is something that we talk about, but it's actually not one of the main reasons that customers would choose to go back to PG&E. And we have an 80% retention rate across the board. So all of our communities, we can say about 80% of customers are enrolled. And about 2% of customers are enrolled in our deep green 100% renewable service. So.
Wow, that's definitely very impressive. Would you be able to talk a little bit more about some of the enrollment and outreach efforts? Especially at the beginning with doing things like mailers, community events.
Sure.
What really helped you get going and keep the momentum moving forward?
Yeah, so at the very beginning, it was a really big local push. We were started by a couple local agencies, government agencies in Marin, and it was this really big grassroots movement. It was a lot of people who just really believed in this. And when we rolled out, it was a small number, it was about 5,000 customers, and then it just grew a little bit year after year. And actually Richmond was one of the second community to join. They were super excited about this concept, so they've been with us since 2010. And having that opportunity to branch out so quickly has been really great. As far as outreach goes, when we enroll new communities, this past year what we did was an open enrollment process. So we let all of the communities who were considering joining know that now was the time if they wanted to join, and they met the requirements, which was that we were able to secure enough energy for them, and that including them in our service area did not force rates to increase for our other customers, that they would be allowed to join. So we put out that request, and we ended up with the 4 cities and a town in Napa, as well as Lafayette and Walnut Creek, that decided to join. When we enroll new communities, by state law, the only outreach that we are required to do is to send 4 mailers. What format they come in is up to us. What we have done is we have sent 5 mailers. Every time we've enrolled new communities, we've sent 5 for good measure. And we're also really active in the community. So we go to farmers markets, we schedule community meetings, we're at board meetings, we make phone calls and emails. Any way that we can really get out there and be involved, we make an attempt to do that. So it's been really busy over here these past couple months, going out, getting involved, making sure that, trying to make sure that customers know who we are and what their choices are. The purpose of our organization is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions first and foremost, but we want to be offering our customers choices. So letting them know what their options are, even if it means that, we're having a higher rate of opt-outs, is more important, because customers should have the right to choose where their energy is coming from. So I hope that kind of answer your question.
Yeah, definitely. We really only have time for one more question right now, but I think that your story and you being a fellow and starting to work for Marin Clean Energy is super compelling story, and something that's very interesting for other fellows in our cohort. And I guess just to conclude your section, I was wondering if you had any advice or resources or anything for the fellows in our cohort who we're approaching the end of our fellowship, and just if you have any last words of advice for us as we move forward to working with local governments, and for some of us getting into energy as a professional path.
Sure. So I think my advice is going to be the same advice that everyone gives you, which is just to get involved as much as you possibly can. When you have opportunities to do something or learn something, take them, jump at them. And also, it takes a while to find a place that is good for you. When I graduated grad school, I spent 4 or 5 months looking for work, and it takes time. So for those of you who are still looking, that's completely normal. And a lot of my friends from grad school and a lot of my friends from the Climate Corps program now have really amazing opportunities to learn and grow, and some people are in really great career opportunities. So I think that, by doing a program like CivicSpark, you've already set yourself up for success. And I know that many of you probably have, more information than I do on the energy market, or more information on, your specialty, whatever it is that you're working on. So I think that it's just an exciting opportunity, and I think my biggest piece of advice is to just try to remain calm and take advantage of the opportunities you have, and be willing to see where they take you.
All right, thank you very much, Jenna. And for the cohort, please feel free to keep sending in questions, and at the end, if we have time, we'll try to answer them. For now, though, I'm going to pass it off to Savannah, who will introduce our last speaker. Thank you, Jenna.
Thank you.
So thank you. So we're going to move on to our last speaker, Benjamin Finkelor. He is the Executive Director for the UC Davis Energy Efficiency Center. In this role, he manages the general operations of the organization, including the establishment and ongoing oversight of strategic research, collaborations between key faculty, staff, and students at UC Davis. He also works to maintain and grow relationships with supporting industry partners and communicate RD&D progress to promote sponsors. Prior to joining the EEC, Mr. Finkelor served in a variety of roles with the clean technology sector, including Director of Business Development for local clean energy startup company, Interim Executive Director for Clean Start. As a Clean Start analyst for the private equity arm of California Public Employees Retirement System. Mr. Finkelor earned an MBA from the Graduate School of Management at the University of California, Davis, where he studied technology management. He also earned an emphasis in corporate environmental management through the Bren School at UC Santa Barbara. So I'd like to turn it over to you, Ben. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you for having me. Really delighted to be a part of this webinar and just to be a part of this group here that's really kind of working to change meet California's future energy needs. So really thrilled to be able to join you for this. I'm just going to assume that you guys can see this PowerPoint. So I'll use this as a guide, but I'll start with just a quick commercial on kind of who I am and like what kind of the Energy Efficiency Center is and what we're doing at UC Davis. Because if I have this opportunity, I'm going to take 2 minutes just to talk about our program, and then I'll jump into kind of the case study, which I've been asked to talk about, which is here in West Village community, where my offices are on the UC Davis campus. And I'm going to provide you this commercial here on our program, both because just to give you some context of what we're studying, what we're working on, how we're trying to help solve the energy challenges that face California, but at the same time, if in your future careers you are interested in coming back and getting your master's or PhD in energy or transportation related program, we've got a great program here. So I'm the executive director for the Energy Efficiency Center. It's one of many research programs within kind of UC Davis's programs. We have a strong program in ag and vet med, but we also have a strong program in transportation and energy. We have over 300 staff here, but most importantly, we have 2 now graduate programs, one in transportation technology and policy. You can get a PhD or a master's specifically in that, or we're going to be launching this energy graduate group this fall. Actually, the next fall we'll be taking, it'll be more formal launch. This fall is just really for people who are already at university that want to transfer in, but we'll be opening up for fall 2017. So look for that. That's pretty exciting. And we've had a lot of high-profile kind of success in terms of our impact and in terms of our programs in California, and then also outside of California. So here are just a list of some of the programs that we've got. We have this Institute of Transportation Studies. We currently host the National Center for Sustainable Transportation for the whole country, focusing on sustainable transportation. There's other universities that focus on traffic and congestion and that type of thing, but we're really focused on sustainability. We do some work on the policy side and through both the Institute as well as our energy efficiency group here. And you'll see we have expertise in lighting technology, in cooling efficiency, in water and this water energy nexus. Every gallon of water you save, you can save energy, and when you save energy, you actually save water. So it's a positive feedback loop there. We also do work in developing countries as well, but I'm going to talk about kind of the work that we've done in West Village, which is really leveraging a lot of our expertise on the efficiency side across these different centers of excellence. We're actually the first university-based energy efficiency center in the U.S., and our mission is to accelerate the development and commercialization of energy efficiency technologies and solutions. These are our partners. We partner both with investor-owned utilities, but also are eager to partner with municipality, local government, state government, as well as other private sector partners. We're really, again, because we're focused on commercialization, we really do want to engage with industry, because at the end of the day, they need to buy or sell something and get it into the market. And so partnering with industry is important in that regard. We're not going to be doing market deployment. We do demonstrations of different technologies, and again, West Village is a case study, is a great example of both demonstration as well as deployment. And what the earlier speaker talked about, the importance of RD&D, so research and development as well as demonstration and deployment, and that the state has invested through various machinations. It used to be called PEER, the Public Investment Research Program out of the Energy Commission. Now it's called EPIC, Electric Program for Innovation, I think. I forget what it actually stands for, but that's where a lot of the funding in California goes towards. And just to give you a sense of it, a lot of that I'd say most of that money is more on the applied side. DOE, the federal government, will invest in R&D, but it tends to be more on the basic funding, basic research side. So California has really, has a really rich history in advancing energy efficiency and a piece of this here. So I'm going to just jump ahead and talk about West Village. So back in 2001, our campus recognized that we were growing, and so, but we were in a college town, it's the town of Davis. It has what we call a smart growth policy, which can translate to a no growth kind of approach. So there's really no new housing stock that was being added, and yet at the same time our university was growing in terms of its faculty and staff. If we wanted to maintain the college town, we had to get into the housing business. And we already had some student housing on our campus, and we still have room to grow that. But there's a need for faculty and staff housing that would be located in the city of Davis, preferably that would be below market, so that if we are recruiting faculty and staff, we can bring them to be able to have a place in the community at a cost that they can afford. Now, it's not affordable housing, but the target was below market because affordable housing is challenging. But what we did is we carved out 200 acres of our land that was what I like to think of as prime agricultural research land that we've turned into prime building research space. But fundamentally, we have plenty of land here in Davis. We're one of the few UCs that has that luxury, and so we're able to allocate it for a smart, densely populated development. And it's a mixed-use neighborhood, which I'll kind of talk through. And as part of that, the way the campus decided to build out the development was to partner with a private sector partner, where we would invest in some of the public infrastructure to the site, but then we do a ground lease to a master, through a master lease to a master plan developer. And they would design, build, own, and operate on a 65-year ground lease some student apartment buildings and mixed-use buildings. And they would also go ahead and build 350 single-family homes, which they would design and build, but then they would sell to residents. And those residents, both the student apartments, obviously, but also for the single-family homes, they would have to be affiliated with the university to live in the community. And if, for instance, they end up losing their job or relocating, or then they would have to sell that back to sell their ownership of the building back to the university, and then we would be able to sell it to another faculty or staff. So the idea is to really provide staff and faculty as well as students housing in a neighborhood right on campus to allow for us to continue our. So that's the kind of origin story for West Village. It took us 8 years to get through the kind of planning process. We ended up hiring this private sector developer, and in 2008 the financial crisis hit, and so most construction pretty much stopped in the country. But actually, West Village was one of the few major construction projects that was happening. Right around 2006, our center was launched, and we were asked to can we somehow make this development more energy efficient, even though it wasn't written into the contract with the developer that they should somehow make it more environmentally friendly. And so we started a study. This is back in 2007. We said, look, you can make it more efficient if you invest these types of lighting and HVAC systems based on our kind of expertise. You can reduce the amount of energy consumption. At the time, there wasn't the term of art zero net energy. That was a very new term that wasn't bandied about really. And so we actually, at the end of our report, we said, we could do 15% better than code. We could do 30% better than code. We could even add a little bit of solar. But what we could do if we wanted to go really big is go after this zero net energy goal. And of course, a year later, in 2008, the California Energy Efficiency Strategic Plan came out, where all new residential construction is targeted at being zero net energy by 2020, and all commercial construction would be that way by 2030. So we're a little bit ahead of our time, both because nobody was really building, and because it wasn't even written into the contract, and because it wasn't really kind of a state kind of stretch goal, which was a decade, over a decade later. But we took on that goal, but the idea was that we would only get it if first and foremost we got zero net impact to the pro forma for the developer. That is, the private sector partner is expected to make a certain amount of money. If this was going to cost them more money than it would have if they didn't have that goal, then they either wanted to somehow be compensated for it or have somebody else invest those dollars. So we agreed that, even though there was a handshake agreement, let's try it and go after zero net energy. We would do that, but we wouldn't impact their pro forma, their profit. We also didn't want to impact the customer. That is, we want to have zero net impact on the customer. They had to rent or sell these facilities that they were building, and they didn't want the customer to see either a higher annual energy bill than they would spend if they were, say, across the street, or they didn't want to see them have to suffer. That is, have to suffer through cold showers and warm beer. They wanted a refrigerator that would work, and they wanted, just a comfortable environment for the residents. So that was the kind of agreement. And if we hit those two objectives, then we can go after zero net energy, and we would try to get that through a combination of energy efficiency and renewables. So I'm going to give you just so this is the original approach. Was we did want to include environmental responsiveness and quality of place and housing affordability, but now we wanted to overlay on top of this the zero net energy goal. I'm going to give you some context. Here's the city of Davis. This is it's about 60,000 people that live there. West Village is right here. It's carved out of this West Campus. So if you've ever been to UC Davis, this is kind of the campus that you can usually think of. Just to give you a context, you could put probably 2 UCLAs and 1 Berkeley just on our central campus. South Campus here is also more ag land, and kind of that's where our wastewater treatment plant is. This West Campus is a lot of it is ag land, pasture land. We have actually a capped landfill and an airport. We have a lot of stuff going on. But this right here is about 220 acres, and that's where we decided to put, this neighborhood, which is there's a bike path, so these people would actually bike across to the central campus. They're not allowed to have a parking permit on the central campus if they live in West Village. That's part of the sustainability kind of strategy. So it's kind of a company town. Here's another picture of it, just aerial. So you can see this is the first part of West Village that's been built out. None of the single-family homes, which are over here on the northern side, but this is the left side of the diagram here. None of those single-family homes have been built. Construction will start actually in fall of next year, and first occupancy for the first 50 homes, which will be right here, will be probably spring of 2000 or June of 2018. But you can see that it's built out, and you see all these solar panels here covering some of the parking lots. You see some solar on some of the rooftops as well. And this is actually an earlier picture, so there's actually more build out going forward. So you can see this is actually during some of the construction. You can see this now, we're facing north now, so it's slightly different. You can see all the solar now covering some of the rooftops there. And there's an interesting story with that as well, so I'll probably come back to that. But basically, the goal to get to zero net energy is you want to reduce your energy consumption, targeting 50% reduction beyond code, and then you make up the rest with on-site renewables. We did look at using bio-waste to provide power a biodigester, which would then either produce the electricity, or you could potentially use the natural gas in the natural gas system. We actually went with a largely just electric only strategy. There is some natural gas for heating the pool and for some of the retail restaurant facilities and some of the research facilities in the office space, but going forward we're probably going to be all electric. And so the 50% goal is beyond code, what's expected. And that's where you get the biggest savings. Of course, I'm at the Energy Efficiency Center, so we tend to focus really more on the energy efficiency side than we do on the production side, the solar side. Carmel Partners, by the way, is the name of the private sector partner. You can see that in the happen, right? So the actual, this is kind of a diagram of some of the energy resources that have been deployed in West Village. And you'll see that there, and if you come and visit as well, you'll see that it's not crazy cutting edge technology. In fact, when I look at these buildings here, even though we talked to them about LED technology, at the time the cost curves were not such that the developer was getting a good deal, a good enough kind of deal from an economic standpoint. And keep in mind, they have to think about warranties as well. The price curves had not come down enough for them to justify investing in LEDs for these buildings here. So these actually incorporate some fluorescence still, but these ones that are shown as under construction, they're fully built out now. Those all have LEDs incorporated in them. So you can see just in some of these transitions, there's a path to transition of the different technology and the economics and cost benefits. But as you see here, also one other thing that you'll notice is that there's north-facing roofs. And so half the rooftops here are not covered in solar. That's in part because we didn't think we would be putting solar on the rooftops. We thought it would just all be pathway. But then we realized that we could do that. And so, but again, you see there's these little cutouts in some of these solar panels. And that's in part because there's venting coming up in the middle of those buildings and building the rooftops. Well, if you look at these ones over here around the village square, you still have the cutouts, but you have all south-facing roofs. Those are sawtooth type roofs, so they're all facing south. And so that allows for more solar. Well, these ones that are constructed now going forward, all the vents are in the back of the buildings on the north side, and it's all south-facing roofs, and those are all covered in solar. The full roof is covered. And so you see again another transition over time, what's happened as they built it out. This is all fully built out now, and as I said, there's going to be more built out with the single-family homes, and that'll change over time. And so, as you can see, Title 24 back in 2008, we saw kind of a projection of what the kilowatt-hour consumption is for the single-family, the multifamily, and the mixed-use, and what we're able to do with some of the energy conservation measures that we deployed. And actually, one of the largest things that's left remaining, as you'll see on this side here, is the other electric, the miscellaneous electric load. That is, what are these people plugging in to the outlets? Because we hardwired the lighting, we hardwired the fans, our air conditioning systems are much more efficient. So it's that other that's the question mark. And that, in fact, is why we haven't hit our goal of 100% zero net energy. That's one of the major reasons we haven't is because we're about 80% of the way there, is because of behavior. And so each resident is going to be different. About a third of the residents use less than we thought they would, about a third use about what we thought they would, and about a third of the residents use 2 to 3 times what we thought they would. And that's, again, in large part because of behavioral differences. The other reason is that we chose to align the interests. There's always a split incentive when it comes to energy efficiency and multi-tenant spaces. So the developer designed, built, own, and operates. They just don't occupy. And so it's in their interest to invest in energy efficiency, and they chose to take the electricity bills and pay them themselves, and they include the cost of electricity into the rent. Now that, of course, changes the incentive for the residents because they don't see an electricity bill, they have no incentive to save. And so they're trying to do different educational measures to try to reduce that, to increase it, provide a non-monetary incentive for them to save. Let's see, I'm not sure why there we go. So I mentioned kind of we're not actually hitting our goal. This is at 87%. We're around, the last I checked, we were actually around 82%. And that's in part because we're actually increasing the density too. So this is actually going to throw off our metric quite a bit because we're actually densifying. So we're allowing people to double up in some of the rooms. That allows us to meet our housing goals. It allows the economics to improve for the developer. But of course, the challenge is, even though we're getting higher density and our per capita energy consumption is actually lower, our net energy consumption is actually higher. And so that's hurting our C&E goals as well. But we really do view this as a living laboratory, both the existing kind of infrastructure that we have, which is, again, it's a little bit different because we don't have it under our control. It's under the control of a private developer. at least for the next 61 years under the ground lease. But the new single-family homes, while they were going to be developed and built by a private developer, we actually took control of that going forward. So we're going to be much more in control of how those are built out and what technologies are deployed. And of course, we're going to still focus on affordability, but we'll also be able to increase the amount of research that we're able to do, active research that we're able to do with the residents. And last thing is, this is a picture of the Honda Smart Home, which has been built and is operating for the past 3 years. A family lives in it currently. If you do come to visit, we'll be able to give you a tour at least of the visitor center one day a month. Actually, today is one of those days we can actually walk in and see the inside of it. But it's a demonstration of both zero net energy for not only the building but also the vehicle. So Honda provides a fit EV. They actually designed and built the home as a way to showcase that, you know, a zero carbon or a low carbon kind of future for, but not only vehicles but also residences. And as part of that, we designed both the lighting and the HVAC system. So it's cutting edge. It's not bleeding edge. We like to call it leading edge technology that's deployed. And we think a lot of that is actually going to, a lot of the technologies that are included in the Honda home are going to influence the design of the next 50 homes that are built and the ensuing 300 homes after that are built in West Village. So at full build out, we will have about 6,000 people living in West Village as part of the zero net energy community. Right now we have about 2,500. Not to mention our offices here, and the offices include all of the folks I mentioned earlier, transportation studies and our cooling center and our water center and my offices as well. So I'm going to end it there and allow for any questions if we have time, although I think we're running up at the end here.
Thank you so much, Ben. We do have a couple questions. First question, have you and your team considered implementing community-based marketing as a means to improve the residents' energy use patterns?
Yeah, and we've done different pilots of this, and when I say we, I mean the private sector developer. It's because they own and operate it. They're interested, right? Because if they can get their people to the residents to save energy, then they're not going to have to pay any extra electricity bill. So it's in their interest. There's different kind of tacks and approaches to that. But one thing we're trying to do is just create a way for them to see actually how much energy they're using. Even because a lot of them, because they don't get a bill, they just don't know, right? And so we're working on different data techniques, right, and kind of data visualization techniques for that. So
cool.
But there's other ones. You know, the universities will do this in dorms, where they do competitions and those types of things between, say, buildings, and so that's other things that are being explored. Absolutely.
Cool. Another question was, did you consider the use of time-dependent valuation when creating the Zero Net Energy Village plan?
Yeah, great question. I'd say the answer is no for the first phase that's already been built. As maybe the questioner knows, the way the Energy Commission defines Z&E, it actually has to do with TDV, which of course makes sense because when you use the energy is really important, especially now that the load profile has changed so dramatically with the significant penetration of solar. We have 4.2 megawatts of solar in this pretty dense community, and so example of the duck curve happening here. The peak actually in West Village is around 11 o'clock at night, and that's just because of the lifestyle of students. But unfortunately, our issue with TDV and kind of the Energy Commission's definition of zero net energy, relying on TDV, is that it's very difficult to actually measure and prove that something is zero net energy given the current definition. And there's a variety of technical reasons why that's the case. We're actually shifting away from zero net energy, in part because our University of California system, I think it was 3 years ago, our president, Janet Napolitano, announced a goal of carbon neutrality by 2025. So zero net energy is no longer really the goal for at least for UC. And so when we think about West Village, we're not just thinking about sustainability from an energy perspective, but we're thinking about first of all carbon neutrality, but then also sustainability in water, waste, and emissions, as well as kind of the energy component and how it relates to carbon. And so our goal, we're actually currently defining the goals for the next phase of West Village, which is going to be these single-family homes. And there's actually going to be some more student apartments. And as part of that, we're going to be doing a more aggressive goal setting that probably will jump the current definition of Z&E at the Energy Commission.
One more quick question. Are there EV charging stations in West Village for vehicles?
Yeah, there are currently EV charging stations. We have a whole center that studies plug-in hybrid electric vehicles. Currently, it's free charging, which does pose some challenges and potential problems. But there are a number of EV charging stations both in West Village currently, and then we're talking about how do we increase the possibility for these new residents to be able to benefit from charging, from electric vehicles, and putting in the EV charging infrastructure up front. But we're also looking at other ways of kind of going after different modes of transportation. Davis is a big biking town, so encouraging bike use by actually planning the streets and making the front street of these houses not streets for cars, but really kind of bike pathways, and having the cars go in the back in the alleyway. Increasing the amount of rideshare opportunities and transit options. But certainly EV infrastructure is something that we've deployed here in West Village, and we're going to be deploying in the next phase.
Perfect. Thank you so much. This is a very cool project, and it's very exciting, and I'm proud to say that it's my alma mater, UC Davis. Thank you so much, Ben, for joining us and sharing your expertise. So
happy to do so.
All right. So where? This one? So we're going to put up on the screen all of our speakers' contact information. I would like to thank all the speakers again. That was an awesome webinar. Hopefully everybody learned a lot, and everybody feels ready and charged for energy. So on behalf of the Central Coast, thank you everybody for attending, and thank you to our speakers.
I also want to thank the Central Coast team for facilitating the last date seminar of the service year. You guys did a really amazing job, and I appreciate all the work that you put into making this happen. So thank you all. And we'll also have a recording of the webinar available that we'll be sharing pretty soon. But thank you all again, and thank you for your great questions. And we can end the webinar now. Thanks all.
Bye.
Bye-bye.